for some reason that video stopped as I made the transition into the company check website, and I've still got my camera in my hand, and it started to make a new video again. I don't know how they did that. It's the first time it's ever happened. Okay, and so this is the Zulueta Developments Limited, is run by 3 directors currently. Yeah, those are Mark Glenn Bridgman Shaw, Stephen Michael McKeever, Timothy William Ashworth Jackson Stops, Mr. William Oliver, Chalfin Nominees Limited, Chalfin Secretaries Limited, Alexander Mark Rummery, Bruce McLaughlin, Craig Vivian Reader, Jonathan Mark Gain. That could be a Mark Twain joke in the financial services industry. Martin Patrick TOUCHY, Peter Donald Roscoe, William Edward Davis. Okay, right then, so this is the people that are still current. Look at the numbers of businesses that they have, and look how many have crashed. Okay, so Shaw has 288 and he's crashed 301 of 589. McKeever has crashed 924 of 966. Stephen Michael McKeever, William Ashworth Jackson Stops has crashed 913 of 1105. Chalfin nominees have resigned from 5,300 of 5,400 that they've been involved in, and this one was appointed for 1 day in 1997. Yeah, this is the word that has Zulu in its name, that is associated with the administration for the papacy in Rome and runs a bank out of London. Yeah, until we get into wartime, and then they need to go to safer locations. Look at that. Chalfin Nominees Limited, 5,300 of 5,400 collapso. Okay, and it's the same for every one of the directors and secretaries. Huge numbers resigned of the huge numbers that they have ran. If I open any one of them, you'll see that they are riddled with Ponzi schemes. Let's do that for one of the current directors. So there's McKeever, 924 of 966. This is not my computer failing, it's just so massive, it's taken ages to load. So let's go back to the text that I'm reading from. This is just a tiny part of the story about the English person that is involved in appointing the popes in World War I and then the candidates for the Pope in World War II. Okay, and here we've got, he was raised at the Spanish Embassy in London, and his parents are called Zulueta, and they run the banks in London. Okay, his mother, we've done that bit, Anne Wilcox, who was of Scottish and Dutch ancestry. See this list, they are still at the top. Okay, so this is the list of the papacy candidates. Because that video was cut in two, but not by me, we're explaining the papacy in World War I, in World War II, the role of the papacy way back in the 13th century, in the burning of the pagans, the witches, the earthquakes that occur in Aquila, the people that come out of Aquila that appoint the next popes, even in wartime, in the great conflicts. And then you've got at the bottom here things that we have not yet touched upon in the video on the corrupted Vatican and the genocidal Vatican and the capacity to run diasporas into fascist countries forever. Okay, the Del Vals were an Aragonese family originally from Zaragoza. That's the Saragossa Sea that was stormy when Columbus the Spaniard sailed across it. He got lost in the Golden Triangle, which is the Saragossa Sea, which I believe is also where the city of Atlantis was sunk. Yeah, that's where the slaves become the owners, and you would not want that above water in a fairy story like that. His elder brother Alfonso, Marquis of Merry del Val, was Spanish ambassador to the United Kingdom between 1913 and 1931. A very, very turbulent period, and Spain are strictly neutral for genocidal, profiteering and diaspora of the villains and the cross-continental profiteers that were involved in the Spanish embassy, then in the Canary Islands, then in fascist Latin America. And I've put that bit there, connies for neutrality. Okay, the connies is the rabbit's joke, which is the diaspora of Hitler's friends, and that's the yellow submarine joke, and the Ian Fleming joke, and all of the jokes about the Bond movies, and all of our heroes being massive financial criminals in the tax havens. Merry del Val lived in England until 1878. His mother's family owned a large villa in Boscombe, a suburb of Bournemouth. Do you get it? Bourne Leisure, where two rivers meet, two waters meet. That's the fishing story about the drug triumvirates that were led by the Plunkett Greens. Yeah? They write lovely novels about rural England. They are the owners of the world's narcotic wealth, and they murder every nation that gets in their way to achieve that. Kind of gusty now. Okay, so Merry del Val lived in England until, okay, brought up in Bournemouth. Now that is right opposite the Isle of Wight, where all of the shenanigans went on involving Queen Victoria, the illegitimate children, but the only legitimate marriage she was engaged in there was with the person who was Marcus Manuel, and that is a tragedy. They married when they were only teenagers. That was legal then. They had the Marcus Manuel baby, and it was killed when it went back to Germany because it was a legitimate claimant to the British throne. All of the illegitimate children that were sired by the Rothschilds and the one by John Brown are ineligible to be the kings, but they become the kings and queens, and they marry into elites all over Europe, which is why all of those names are so touchy. Yeah, okay. So he was ordained a priest on 30th December 1888. That's the year of the culmination of the massacre of the American Indians at Wounded Knee, and all of the armies that have come from France and Britain and been involved from Canada. Yeah, remember that these guys are also diplomats and massive representatives for the profiteers that are the Canadian warmongers, and that's the Beaverbrook dynasty. Okay, entrusted. Let's see if we can get into that business site administration now. Okay, so we've tried to open up Michael McKeever's business registry, because he's linked into this family that used to run the banks in London. Okay, they've got 15 directors still current in the British Business Registry, and they've got 3 companies, and we're looking at the activities in one of them. Year of birth 1970. Director ID for Stephen McKeever is 907 982 2758. Let's have a look for his Ponzi's. Sinar Developments 1 and 2. Sinar, do you get it? He's got 900 companies. Halfields, that's Hellfields number 2 Limited. Marriott 4, Marriott 2 Developments Limited, Lamont Developments Limited, interesting in a local context. Abbey Major Marriott 3 Developments Limited. See them all lined up? That's called Pump and Dump. That will be 2008 when the banks were crashed. Okay? Margaret Spiller Developments, Short Hose. This is not as horrendous as the ones that I arbitrarily opened this morning, but he's got more companies than those ones did. Okay, so yeah, 2008, all of them go elsewhere, into the Caribbean, into Delaware, into the Channel Islands. Yeah, all of it is a massive joke. Let's take you back and give you a summary of that, because I don't want to take your attention off the religious aspects in case I get the people in the clerical uniforms tomorrow too confused. Okay. Right then, so when I discovered the companies, let's go back to just the listing of what we got, and you can do this for yourself at any time. So I looked up Zulueta and I got 3 companies. 2 of them are in Crown Place, one of them's and these are different directors for number 2 Limited. Yeah. And it is ever so twisted. And let's have a wee look at the directors for that one, so that we can show you that this is massive. And I don't know whether or not there are any Zuluetas left on the boards. I don't think I mentioned any in that last listing. Edward Porteous, so that could be a Melrose and Porteous connection, but I do not hazard a guess on that. Okay, still active. Edward McGregor Porteous. William Oliver, Chalfin Nominees Limited. Yeah, so they're interlocking directors for one day. They do the laundering, they do the pumping and dumping. These guys are still current. These guys were profiteering in the lead up to the crashing of the banks in 2008, when they're no longer associated with the company. Isn't that clever? But I cannot see any Zuluetas or Zuluetas on the boards. Let's see what the... Okay, there's a Donald Roscoe. Let's just go back and show you the overall listings and how they've got 15 directors named Zulueta involved in the British Business Register still. So you can see that at the top. Companies 3, we've been through all of those. Directors 15. And let's just have a wee look. It's not a crime to be a director, and all I want you to know is that this is a papal legacy, and you need to make films about the Zulu wars, and you need to go to war so that we can have the whole of South Africa to ourselves. There are no longer any Zulueta banks in Britain as far as I'm aware. There's Exeter registrations, Twickenham, Southwest 18, that could be Woolwich. Oh sorry, that would be Southeast. Susan Elizabeth, Carlos Zulueta, Maria Zulueta. Just to keep the biblical thing together, the Oxford one is Paul de Zulueta, and we've got a Carlos. The Wolverine linkage. And Dr. Paquita Carmen Bullen de Zulueta. That's it. And she's West 11 2NS. Let's have a wee look at her before we go back to the religious stuff. Lansdowne Crescent, London. West 11. No, just the one company. Okay, so let's get back to the Zuletas, and this is just the person who is the English papal administrators' relatives in the banking sector in London in the 19th century. Okay, and that person then, in the lead up to World War I, became the secretary of the College of Cardinals. Okay, English. Okay, so entrusted by Leo XIII with the question of validity of Anglican orders. Yeah, that's the Church of England. He led the Holy See to the negative response in September 1896 with the papal bull Apostolicae Curiae, of which he was the main architect. On the basis of this bull, Leo XIII confirmed the nullity of the ordinations carried out with the Anglican rite, denying the apostolic succession of bishops of the Church of England. So what you've got here is an Englishman from the Spanish embassy who's picked to lead the fallout with England, and he gets trained to become a cleric in Justin Welby's Durham, where my mate Professor Murray is the prof in the theological department at Durham University, and actually answered some of my emails at one stage, because I'm an honorary professor there. I get no money. These are fraudsters in a massive academic department, and the Durham Cathedral is absolutely beautiful, but it's dedicated entirely to fraudulent Christianity, and it's tragic. Okay, so this is the man who was named apostolic delegate to Canada, Roman Curia, in charge of the formation of priests who are to serve in the diplomatic corps of the Holy See. Do you see the backgrounds and the prerequisites that are required for a job like that? In 1902 he was the papal representative to the coronation of King Edward VII, but he does not condone the Church of England or the Anglican Church, because he's there to be a divisive tool, accompanied by Eugenio Pacelli, that's eugenics peacemaker. Okay, by a coincidence, the secretary of the Sacred Consistorial Congregation, who was also the secretary of the College of Cardinals and therefore of the conclave, I believe that's the people that pick the next pope, had died almost at the same time as Leo, the last pope. Isn't that scandalous? That the people who picked the next one die at the same time, really suddenly and together, at the time that they need a replacement. In haste, the Cardinals chose as his successor Archbishop Merry del Val, the Londoner. I don't know if he can do the Cockney accent and the shell jokes, yeah, who had been ordained a bishop only 3 years before. Justin Welby was only a bishop 1 year before he became the Archbishop of Canterbury, and he is the son of Winston Churchill's private secretary, and his dad was a socialist. If you believe that, you're more of a fool than I take you for. Okay, the choice had been made from a pool of 3 names. The 2 rejected candidates were the substitute for General Affairs of the Secretariat of State, Giacomo della Chiesa, and Pietro Gaspari, then serving as Secretary of Extraordinary Ecclesiastical Affairs. Okay, there are corpses for candidates everywhere in this story, but none of them rise from the dead. And I still have not explained this little trick yeah, that they want you to believe is real and is routine if you're a powerful messianic presence on this earth. Right then, I still don't know how they managed to shut down my transmission of that news that this person is connected to Spanish diplomats in London, and Spain is neutral through the whole conflict, but is a major part of the laundering of the culprits and their funds and their gold. According to Rafael Merry del Val, during the conclave of 1903, in which he served in the role of secretary of the conclave, Cardinal Jan Puzina, the Kozierzy of Krakow, that could be John Paul II, the Polish Pope, who was the first Jew to become the Pope, and that's in the writings of the Carrington Hitchcock historian, who specialises in the links of the papacy with the Rothschilds, but not the current ones. Yet I have not yet found Pope Francis on the business register. That's why they're allowed to change their names so many times in their career, and that's why they choose so many middle names and gender biased names to make it really confusing. But this bit's really important. According to Rafael Merry del Val, during the conclave of 1903, in which he served in the role of secretary of the conclave, Cardinal Jan Puzina de Kozierzy of Krakow came to see him, demanding to announce his veto against Cardinal Rompola in the name of Emperor Franz Joseph of Austria-Hungary, who was soon to die. So the Vatican is warmongering with the Humes, the philosophers of the borders, and the fence-bridged Sarajevo and the river there. This is the launch of World War II and the involvement of the Vatican administrators. Archbishop Merry del Val protested and refused to even accept the document, which in the heat of the debate fell on the floor and was picked back up by Cardinal Puzina. Yeah, that's the pussy joke. Cardinal Puzina announced the veto anyway in the presence of the cardinals gathered in the Sistine Chapel. The College of Cardinals was outraged. Rampolla, according to Merry del Val, actually gained votes after the veto. Later he opined to Ludwig von Pastor that Cardinal Rampolla never had a chance because the cardinals wanted a new direction after the pontificate. Okay, pussy joke, but not the same one that let the rats out of the bag. That is Gregory the IX, who had a thing about black cats, who killed them all, and it meant that the rats were able to thrive and give us all the bubonic plague in the 13th century, which is why the Blackadder team laugh at that one. Yeah, they think it's really funny. And in this episode, Captain Cook, they cook the rats for their dinner in the trenches. He does the cooking. He's the head of fundraising for Tony Blair's Labour Party through all of Tony Blair's time in office. That's the Robinson character. Yeah, that's the Blackadder character, and he is played by he is actually plays out the role of Mr. Bean at the opening of the London Olympics, and nobody at that stage knows that Mr. Bean is the war correspondent for the massacres at Gallipoli run by the Rothschilds and Winston Churchill. Okay, so Emperor Franz Joseph. After his election, the new Pope, this is Pope, after his election, the new Pope, Pius X, decreed automatic excommunication on anyone who should try to influence a conclave with a threat or a veto. In other words, he's corruptly murdered the other candidates, and he's now changing the rules so that he cannot be unpicked as an unjust and murderous new appointee to the head job. He's not one that is associated with the war, though. Okay, let's keep going. After a 2-month trial period, Pius X named him Pro-Secretary of State. That November he became the first cardinal elevated by the Pope, a traditional reward to the secretary of a conclave becoming cardinal priest. So if you're bold enough to appoint the next Pope, you get rewarded for it. Isn't that clever in financial services? Cardinal Priest of Santa Prassede and full Secretary of State, replacing Cardinal Ramploma, the loser and the advocate for the other guys that end up dead in the ditch, who was moved to the post of Secretary of the Holy Office. Okay, and as a joke, they make a big speech. The praise which he received from Pope Pius X on November 1903, the day Merry del Val received the Cardinal's hat, went as follows: "The good odour of Christ, Lord Cardinal, that you have spread in every place, even in your temporary dwelling, and the many works of charity to which you have dedicated yourself constantly in your priestly ministry, especially in this our city of Rome, have won for you, with admiration, universal esteem." That's the joke about Jesus Christ, and they tell you that it has a good smell. It's the Piso stench, and a proclamation, a pompous proclamation from someone who has the Piso name emblazoned in his ID, his false ID. Okay, do you get it? All of them win Oscars. The Pinocchio film is the joke about their successors who ran World War II, son of a shoemaker, and that is the Warner Brothers joke on the other side of the Atlantic. He was proactive in combating modernism. Yet this is the merry character among the clergy, especially the university professors, and they launch an action group called Sodatilium Pianum, with the Piso joke in it again. Yeah, the piano words, all of the movies they make, all of it is a joke about the Pisos. Among his diplomatic achievements was the signing of a concordat with Serbia in the Balkans barely 4 days before the assassination of the Austrian heir apparent Frans Ferdinand in Sarajevo on the 28th of June 1914, plunged Europe into the First World War. Do you get it? They're in it by design, by motive, and that is the cash and the cowl, and that is, sadly, the oaths that the Jesuit black popes have signed. Yeah, and even in the writings of Lucis and all of the UN religious manipulation stuff that we've had in the last couple of decades, all of that is openly declared. Yeah, and it is just amazing that they can get away with it for so long, but because they have control of the war crimes trials and all of the world leadership team, they have nothing to fear until they teach the ordinary people to read and write and speak in a multilingual way and make videos for themselves without being reliant on the BBC or BBC Light Entertainment with its Zionist leaders, who are the propagandists and the people that execute people for their loyalty during the great conflicts. That's Klaus Maswich. Pius X had already warned a departing Brazilian ambassador a year earlier that Europe would not get through 1914 without a major conflagration. He remained Secretary of State throughout the pontificate of Pius X, but when Pope Benedict XV, an old associate of Rampolla, was elected in the conclave of 1914, he was not reappointed. So cut and run for fear of any genocidal revelations. Okay, thus at the head of the church were the two bishops, Della Chiesi, now Pope Benedict XV, and Gaspari, who had been leapfrogged by Merry del Val on the eve of the conclave in 1903. However, Benedict XV appointed Merry del Val as Secretary of the Supreme Sacred Congregation of the Holy Office on 14 October 1914. It's tragic. They get away totally unscathed. and then Hollywood make the movies and win the Oscars. Okay, the Zulu banks bit I've already explained to you. Yeah, so that is the involvement of a company, of a family called the Zuluetas, who were in the parentage of that Roman Cardinal, Church of Roman Cardinal, who was involved in electing the popes and making the nominees for World War I and World War II. And the banks that they run result in the media cover-ups of the Zulu wars in South Africa and all of the massive land grabs got down there, and all of that leads to the films that are made about the Zulus, and all of the romanticism and all of the music is the same author as the Out of Africa film featuring Robert Redford. And the heroes that we have in America. Okay, let's go now to the ancient things that was the launch of the Catholic Church. It's a massive scam. This is just what I found in the search engine, and what you've got is a series of declarations that the person Gregory the Ninth that these guys laugh at in the Captain Cook episode is actually about the burning of the pagan nations and the witches and the Wiccans and all of the straw man jokes, the shamans. All of the pagan beliefs are burnt because Christianity is much more powerful, because it has the king's support and all of his armies, and all of those armies are funded by the same moneylenders who are the Rothschilds, and it's the same still. But now what they do is they take over the central bank, so they don't have to worry about the armies so much, because they control the issuance of money in every country on our globe. And that's in Frankfurt, 2 meters nearer to Berlin. Okay, the Christian extermination of witches, Pope Gregory the Ninth. That's why they find it so funny in the Time team. They laugh at all of the cults, they laugh at the historic implications. If it's pomp and circumstance and it leads to the death of millions, then it is an even bigger laugh for these sad bastards. And that is Tony Blair's fundraiser for all of his time. He's the boss at the Time team. The Time team is sponsored by Walt Disney and Kellogg's, with the cock crowing on the front of the packet. Okay, the Burning Times. So every one of these hits has Gregory the Ninth in it. Medieval Inquisition, Witch Trials of History, the last great American witch trial. That's in Salem, and it's available in popular culture, like the output of all of the great writers. How was Pope Gregory the Ninth affected by witch hunts of the day? Rejection of Pascal's wager, witch hunts. In Search of History, Salem witch trials, pagan presence, witch hunts in the Western world, persecution.